All right, how's everyone doing? I'm Rich CELENZA. Thanks for tuning into the Rich CELENZA Show. WTF are you talking about? So, what I want to call today's podcast is it's a lot easier to critique than it is to create. So, when I was younger, I guess you could say, I was kind of one of those assholes who was constantly critiquing everything, especially movies, I guess you could say. I was always kind of one of those guys who always had something to say, and for the most part, it was negative, I think. It always didn't I always just found problems or things that were missing. It could be a film. It could be also television. It could be whatever artistic that I was actually looking at. Or just anything in general, which I think sometimes that's good and sometimes it's bad. Because my buddy, my production partner used to say, Rich, if something's missing, you're going to find it a lot of times. Or find a flaw, which I think sometimes could be a gift and sometimes a curse. Because a lot of times I used to say, I can see as I got older all the strengths of something. And then I can see all the flaws of something as well. And I see that in my father. But he's more on the flaw aspect, kind of like I was. And I had to actually take it all in. And after I made my first film, or while getting ready, I should say, to make my first film, Sore Losers, I never realized all the hard work and effort it took to actually make a movie. I know that sounds crazy. Maybe now with there being a lot more information out there, a lot of people know how hard it is to make a movie. But my arrogance back in the 90s, and that's when I made my first movie, was, I read a lot of books on it. I really just thought me and my friends would talk about it like, all we really got to do is set a camera up. We got to get the audio right. We got to get a script, and let's just do this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, let's get everyone together. Let's just kick this in the ass. Let's go make a movie. Holy shit. Making my first movie was probably one of the hardest, if not the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It made me crazy at one time. I mean, at one time, I got so mad at one of the shoots because not everyone showed. And I had to rent out this bar room. It was for a bachelor party scene. And I don't even want to get into it. I got so irate that I was driving somewhere. I might have talked about this on a previous podcast. I got so crazy. I went to an old home that I didn't even live in anymore in Melrose Park. I didn't even live there anymore, but I snapped. They say, when people snap, I was so upset that I really snapped. And I ended up going toward a home that I didn't live in for 10 years. I didn't even I had kids and everything when I lived there with my mother and stepfather. That's how far back this went. But it really made me nuts. But I realized making that film, and I had to edit, I shot the whole film. I had a lot of ups and downs regarding, just finishing the film was insane. And then editing it was just daunting to a certain degree. You can't believe how much you learn. And then after finishing your film, now I'm looking at it and critiquing it to death and destroying it. The audio was nowhere near where I wanted it. It was too long. There was a million problems with it. Now that I look back at it 20 years later, I'm like, I can't believe I conquered that. It really changed me as a person. But it was learning that, again, critiquing something is so easy compared to creating something. And I see on the internet more than ever, I guess you could say, on Twitter, just on social media in general, news, how everybody now has an opinion, and God bless, they do have them. And a lot of it's negative, a lot of it's negativity. And I watch a lot of ESPN sports, and their job, sports analysis, these guys, that's their job. They're journalists. They're there to, talk about the strengths and weaknesses of a team. That's what we like to watch, which is great. But I do sometimes think, for the most part, a lot of people don't realize how simple it is to critique and not create. If you're somebody, though, who wants to create something, right? And you're somebody who's always critiquing others on their work. So say you like music like a lot of people and you want to be a musician. I'm just using that because I think that's very popular. And I was basically raised by musicians. My father was a professional musician. I have other family members. I was around bands and all that. And you could see a lot of times, they may perform or play other people's music, which I think a lot of people who learn music, that's how you start. That's how you begin. For the most part, you don't always start off just creating your own music. So, again, back to if you want to do something and you're always out there critiquing, positive or negative, it may be time for you to take the next step and learn to create. But I do find a lot of people that are bitches that only like to critique and not create. But if you think you can create something better, or something that you think you can maybe make money on, or something that you think others may like, because a lot of times, let's face it, not always, but you create things because you want to, show others or have them. You could create, like I created an app. I haven't finished it yet. It's called the You Around, and I want to make an app that helps people in a time of need. I never saw an app out there, and again, I caught myself critiquing, saying, why isn't anybody doing this for anybody? Blah, blah, blah. So I had to shut my mouth and say, Rich, instead of bitching about people not creating what you wanted to create or not having what you want to have, go out and do it yourself. And that's what I wanted to make this podcast about, because I think a lot of people have great opinions, positive and negative, and they have something that they may be able to create. They just never believed in themselves. And I also think a lot of that is fear-driven, because a lot of people are afraid to create because they're afraid they're going to get critiqued, like how they critique everyone. It's always in the back of their head. They're not looking at creating something for the sake of creating it. They're sometimes looking at it like, if I create this, like, what are people going to think about this? Are they going to think it's shitty? They think it's, whatever the case may be. You can't think like that. I mean, you can, of course, but I wouldn't go that route. The one thing I learned when making my 2 films and even writing my 2 books is everyone has opinions. It's like an asshole, they say. Like, as a joke, everyone has assholes. We all got one. But the truth is, you just have to sometimes create, if you feel like it, just to do it. You are exposing yourself. Very similar to me creating my own podcast. You can basically just critique it to death and say, I don't believe in anything Rich says, or I don't believe in this. I can't believe he said this. I can't believe he does that. It's corny. It's not. He doesn't have enough guests. He doesn't have that. Like, that's me even critiquing myself. Like, you don't, sometimes it may get redundant, blah, blah, blah. But, you got to start somewhere. And if you have that creative gene, or you just want to create things, go do it. Don't let anyone hold you back, not even yourself. Because a lot of times, I always say, like, we're kind of talking to ourselves. We're kind of like 2-3 people. I goof around with that. Because you'll say something, you'll be like, yeah, man, I'm going to go do this. Then in the back of your head, you know how that goes. This is, oh, no, man, we can't do that. We can't afford to go do that. Or we don't have time for that, right? And then there's almost like a third person jumps in and goes, yeah, well, we can make it work, right? If we do this and that. It's kind of like you got all these different type of voices in your head kind of trying to con yourself into doing what you should just go do, because that's what you desire to do. But it's almost like we need to talk ourselves into things, and then we're talking ourselves out of it. It's crazy what we do. But if you truly want to create or invent something, I'd like the word invent, because, a lot of people, I think, are always kind of caught up too with thinking they have to invent something so unique or so different that it sets the world on fire. That was kind of like when I was making films, and I'd run into all these different filmmakers and all these people that write screenplays. Like, this is so different, when, nothing has to be that different always. People like things that are very similar, as you could tell. Like, if you watch a movie on Marvel, the characters or whatever, I'm just using them for an example, them being very similar to one another is what works. When people go so far off the beaten trail, now, sometimes that can work. Don't get me wrong. Even in the film industry, like, you may see Paranormal Activity. Oh, wow, we never saw a movie like that. Blair Witch. Okay, we never saw maybe a film like that. And that's cool. But for the most part, people have to understand what you're creating, right? And, and be able to use it, or just understand it in general, like I said. So when looking to create, sometimes you don't have to go out and create the most unique song in the world or the most unique movie in the world. Just start off creating something that you know about and that you're interested in. That would be my number one thing, or my point to make out, is a lot of people sometimes try to create things that they have no knowledge about, or they have a little knowledge but not enough. So if you are going to do that, I would just make sure you study a lot. But a lot of people have a lot of knowledge regarding a lot of things. And I'm sure they can create something. It could be a web page. If you're a musician, it could be a song. If you're a filmmaker, you can even make a short. You don't have to go into a feature film. If you're an architect, you don't necessarily have to build a high-rise, or you don't have to draw one. Or I don't care if you want to draw something that flies, or whatever you want to create, just create it. And understand, though, it's probably going to take a lot longer than you think. And I tell people all the time that when it comes to creating anything, even your own body, working out, fitness, if you know anything about my podcast or YouTube videos, I talk about you getting people, having unrealistic expectations as far as what type of shape they're going to get in the amount of time they think they're going to get in. It's kind of unrealistic. It doesn't take months to get in shape. It takes years. Same with you. If you want to create something, realize it most likely is not going to take weeks, unless it's something very simple, or months. It may take years, and that's okay. Because a lot of times the more time you put into something, the better it is. And you also have to realize, if you're creating something, that you're going to constantly be evolving and changing up things. I talked about that in a previous podcast, where I thought I kind of mastered building my app, not me programming it or developing it from that standpoint, but getting down all the information I want to get down and how I would have it laid out and all these things. And I'm thinking 6 months. I was on 2 years. I wasn't even done, because I constantly, you're learning about all these different things as you go along when you're creating, and all the pitfalls and all the things you have to look out for, and then also the expense of it and the changes that need to be made. And if you change one thing here, it changes this, all these different types of things. So, and back to critiquing, there's, again, nothing wrong with critiquing, and you can do this. I don't want to tell anybody how they should behave online or personally or anything, but I think sometimes when we critique things, and I used to be one of these people, I think we're always back to looking at the negative. And, I think sometimes, and I think this is happening more and more, and I see it actually in public, is we're kind of more hurtful than we are helpful. And I think we should just keep an eye on that a lot of people are doing things, and it could be even, it doesn't even have to be actors or professional athletes, just people in general, that are doing things, your friends, your colleagues, get behind them a little more maybe, instead of bashing them. But it seems like if we have friends, family members, and colleagues, like, say, of course we support them, right? But say we don't know them, we're kind of bashing them a lot of times. Even though, they're trying, or they have opinions. And a lot of times, you may see a movie that sucks, or you may listen to an album that sucks, or a new car comes out, hypothetically, you don't like it, or I'm just using whatever, right? We're always looking at the negative on that. And I get it. It's your right to say something negative, but I don't think a lot of times we look at all the positive things too. And a lot of things start bad, or they're created, as you know, and they look like shit, and they are shit, but as time evolves, they get amazing. And I just thought I would bring that up, because I just think a lot of times, and I catch myself like that too, and I see so many trolls and so many people out there. You can bash me all day, I get it. I know exactly who I am. And I've been one of those people who bashed myself for so many years and made myself kind of feel like everything I did was shitty. So I kind of got... And of course, if somebody says something to me on my YouTube channel, or comments on my podcast, or even if I talk to them personally, like, Rich, I didn't like this, what you said, or why didn't you do this, or what, and I get it. I take it all in. But I just think sometimes, and that, again, that doesn't mean you shouldn't state your opinions. But sometimes I just think there's a common courtesy, I think, sometimes, and you got to look at the person who actually went out and did it. And you got to sometimes just respect them for doing that. And I don't think a lot of times we do that now. We're all looking for the bad instead of the good. So that's it. I'm going to keep this one short. If you get a chance, definitely check out my YouTube videos. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And like I said, it's a lot easier, definitely, to critique than it is to create. But if you want to create, don't sell yourself short. Or if you want to invent something, go do it. Take the time to do it. I promise you it's worth it. It's worth the journey. And that's all I got for you. Just be careful. Be aware of the money you spend doing it. Don't kill yourself financially. That's the one last thing I would say. So if you're going to do something, at least at the beginning, make sure you can afford it and it doesn't, financially put you in a huge amount of debt. I've been there. So I wouldn't necessarily want you to do that, but it's up to you. All right, take care, and if you're traveling, safe travels.